Hello, my dear old friends. How are you today? I hope your morning began softly, maybe with the rustle of the newspaper, the slow creak of a chair, or the sound of birds somewhere beyond the window. I'm Dr. Thompson, and after 50 years of listening to hearts, minds, and the stories in between, I've learned something important. Memory is not a gift that disappears with age. It's a garden, and like any garden, it fades only when we stop tending to it. Welcome to Retired Doctor, where we talk not just about health, but about dignity, how to keep the spirit and the mind alive as the years pile gently on our shoulders. If you find this message useful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend who might need it. And as always, remember, this channel is for education and reflection. Your health journey is your own, so consult your doctor when you need guidance. But today, let's walk together through a story that might bring some clarity to that quiet fear. Many of us carry the fear of forgetting. I still remember the first time I met a man who told me he was losing his words. His name was Harold. He was 78, strong, the kind of man who had built half his neighborhood with his own hands. But when he came into my office, his voice was shaky. "Doc," he said, "sometimes I can't find the name of the street I've lived on for 40 years. He looked at me like a child caught doing something wrong. I smiled and said, "Harold, your brain is not breaking. It's asking for attention." We forget that the mind, like a muscle, grows soft without movement. For years, Harold's days had become quiet. The TV filled his mornings, naps filled his afternoons, and silence filled the rest. His mind was underworked, not broken. Together, we began to build small rituals, reading the newspaper out loud every morning, calling his old friend George once a week, doing simple hand-eye games I taught him with a deck of cards. 3 months later, he walked into my office grinning. "Doc," he said, "I beat George at chess." He still can't believe it. That's when I knew I had to start teaching this lesson to everyone. The 1% of older adults who keep sharp minds do not depend on luck. They depend on rhythm. They understand that the brain, like the heart, thrives on engagement. You don't need puzzles or complicated memory tests. You need connection between your hands and your mind, between your words and the world. I've always said memory is not just stored in the brain, it's stored in movement, in emotion, in sound. Every time you read aloud, you engage hearing, sight, speech, and understanding all at once. Every time you talk to someone, even for a few minutes, you light up entire circuits that stay dim when you're alone. The 1% do this instinctively. They call a friend just to say hello. They sing along with the radio while cooking. They write down a thought before it drifts away. And because of that, their brains stay alive, not perfect, but vibrant. Science tells us that new neural connections can grow at any age, but I've seen something beyond science. The people who stay curious, who ask questions, who stay grateful they age differently. They walk into a room with a spark still behind their eyes. They remember birthdays, not because they trained for it, but because they care. Memory, I've learned, follows meaning. When something matters to you, your brain fights to keep it. I once visited a patient named Ellen, an artist who kept her studio in the corner of her living room. She was 84 and still painted every morning. When I complimented her work, she said, "Painting helps me remember who I am." She was right. Memory isn't just names or numbers. It's identity, shaped by the things we continue to do. When Ellen mixed colors, her hands reminded her of movement, her eyes remembered light, and her heart recalled joy. That's how she stayed sharp. That's how she stayed herself. If you're listening to this, and you've noticed that you sometimes walk into a room and forget why, don't panic. That's normal. Forgetfulness is not failure, but you must not surrender to it. The brain loves challenge, and it rewards you when you give it work. Read the newspaper aloud, even if it feels silly. Do it once a day. The sound of your own voice reading words will wake something up inside. When you use your hands to write, to knit, to cook, to garden, you give your mind an anchor. That hand-to-brain connection keeps blood flowing, neuron firing, memory alive. And when you speak to your neighbor, to your family, even to yourself, you're exercising the oldest form of memory we have, storytelling. I like to tell my patients that memory isn't lost, it's misplaced. Sometimes we just stop going to the places inside ourselves where those memories live. But you can go back every time you smile at a familiar face, hum an old tune, or recall the smell of your mother's kitchen. You're lighting up those paths again. That's the real memory exercise to keep returning to life. So tonight, before you go to bed, try this. Think of 3 things that made you grateful today. It doesn't matter how small a good meal, a kind word, the sunlight on your window, speak them out loud. Let your brain hear your heart. Gratitude organizes memory. It tells your mind what's worth keeping. You see, the 1% aren't geniuses or lucky survivors. They're gardeners. They water their memories every day with reading, movement, and connection. They know that the brain, like any living thing, blooms where it's nourished. And if you start tomorrow, if you open the paper, read it aloud, call someone you love, and give your brain something meaningful to hold, you'll already be one of them. There's a moment, somewhere in our 70s or 80s, when we begin to notice that time moves differently. You walk into a room and pause for a heartbeat, wondering why you came. A word sits just out of reach, like a name written in fog. It's frightening, isn't it? You feel the mind hesitate, and suddenly, a lifetime of memories feels fragile. I've sat across from many patients who describe that moment not as pain, but as quiet panic. They look at me as if I might have a cure hidden in my coat pocket. But the truth, my friends, is this. Memory does not vanish all at once. It drifts away only when we stop calling it back. I remember a woman named Margaret, who used to sit by her window every morning with a crossword puzzle. When she came to see me, she wasn't worried about her health, she was worried about her words. I keep forgetting simple things, she told me. But when I do these puzzles, I feel like my brain wakes up again. I asked her what she thought was happening. She smiled and said, "I think I'm reminding myself that I'm still here." And she was right. Every time she reached for a word, she reached for herself. The 1%, those rare, luminous souls who keep their minds sharp well into their 80s and beyond, they understand this truth. They don't wait for their brains to fail them. They invite their minds to dance every day. They read aloud not because they're lonely, but because hearing their own voices keeps their inner world alive. They talk with neighbors. They teach grandchildren. They retell the same old stories, not out of repetition, but out of preservation. The act of sharing keeps memory rooted. I often think back to my own mother. She lived to 93 and remembered the lyrics to every song from her youth. When she could no longer walk far, she'd sit by the piano and hum old melodies. "It keeps my head clear," she said. "I didn't fully understand then, but I do now. The rhythm of song links emotion and memory in a way no medicine can. Every melody is a thread between the past and the present." When she hummed, her brain wasn't fading, it was blooming. Science can explain this, how music activates multiple regions of the brain, how speaking or singing rewires pathways. But science cannot measure joy or the power of connection. When you talk, when you laugh, when you listen, you're not just being social, you're exercising your mind. Each word spoken aloud is a tiny spark in the darkness, keeping the mind illuminated. Sometimes, I visit the nursing home near my old clinic. There's a man there named Paul who can't remember what he had for breakfast, but he can tell you, in perfect detail, about the summer of 1955 when he drove to California with his best friend in a blue Ford. He laughs every time he tells the story, as though reliving it again and again. That laughter, that spark, is memory at work. The brain stores emotion longer than facts. If you fill your days with feelings, gratitude, curiosity, affection, your mind will keep finding ways to bring them back. You see, memory doesn't die with age. It changes its form. In your youth, it's fast, sharp, like lightning. In later years, It slows down, deepens, like the steady burn of a candle. That candle doesn't go out unless you stop protecting the flame. The 1% tend to that flame with patience. They don't rush to recall. They sit quietly and let the memory come. They know that when you panic, the door closes. But when you breathe, it opens again. I remember telling a patient once, "Don't fight your forgetfulness. Befriend it." He looked puzzled. I explained, when a memory slips, treat it gently. Don't say, "I'm losing it." Say, "It'll come to me," because it usually does. The brain is listening to how you speak about it. It responds to encouragement, not despair. If you keep saying you're forgetful, your brain will believe you. But if you remind yourself that you're learning, it will rise to the challenge. So tonight, if you misplace your keys or forget a name, smile. That moment is not failure. It's an invitation to slow down, to reconnect, to practice patience. Sit for a moment, breathe, and let your mind trace its steps. When you find what you were looking for, thank your brain for remembering. Gratitude builds pathways too. Empathy, in the end, is what your mind needs most from you. You've carried it for decades, and it has served you with everything it could. Now, it needs gentleness. When you forget, when you hesitate, when you stumble over a word, forgive yourself quickly. The 1% have learned that the brain doesn't thrive under fear. It thrives under kindness. And perhaps that's the greatest secret I've ever learned in 50 years of medicine. The mind doesn't want to be perfect. It wants to be loved. When you treat it with care, it becomes generous again. It begins to remember. Hope, my friends, doesn't arrive like thunder. It slips in quietly, in the small victories you barely notice. You remember where you left your glasses today? You recall an old friend's number without looking it up. You recognize a song on the radio and hum along to it. These are not accidents. These are signs that your mind is listening, healing, reconnecting. I've spent decades watching people lose faith in their own brains, thinking age is a thief that only takes. But the truth is, aging also gives you patience, awareness, and the wisdom to listen to yourself more closely. The 1% who keep their memory sharp aren't obsessed with testing it. They simply live in ways that invite it back. They understand that memory is not a vault, it's a living thing, breathing through the stories you tell, the people you talk to, the books you open, and the laughter you share. Every act of engagement is a form of nourishment. I remember George, a retired mailman who once told me, "Doc, I talk to my plants every morning. They remember me. And somehow, that helps me remember too." He wasn't wrong. The sound of his own voice, the rhythm of routine, the presence of life around him, all of it kept his mind bright. He didn't call it therapy, but it was. The 1% don't overcomplicate their health. They build small, beautiful rituals that remind the mind it still belongs in the world. If you want to join them, start with something simple. When you wake up tomorrow, before the day rushes in, read one page aloud from a book or the newspaper. Let your voice move slowly. Feel the words land. Then, later, call someone, a friend, a sibling, even an old neighbor you haven't spoken to in years. Ask them how they've been. Share a memory, even a short one. Each conversation lights a small lantern in the mind, keeping the paths between yesterday and today alive. In the evening, do something with your hands. Fold laundry, shuffle cards, write a note, peel an apple. The connection between your hands and your brain is deeper than most people realize. When your fingers move, your neurons dance. You build bridges between logic and feeling, between the physical and the mental. I've seen patients regain clarity simply by cooking or drawing again, not because those tasks were easy, but because they required care. Memory, like a garden, grows only where there is attention. You don't need to remember everything, my friends. You only need to remember what matters: kindness, gratitude, laughter, curiosity. Let those be your anchors. The rest will find its way home. Every time you choose connection over isolation, gratitude over worry, curiosity over fear, you're strengthening the very parts of your brain that keep you alive inside. When I was still practicing, I used to end every appointment with one simple question. What's one good thing that happened to you this week? At first, my patients would laugh, thinking it had nothing to do with medicine. But after a while, they began to understand that one question forced their minds to search for light, and each time they found it, their memory grew stronger. Gratitude rewires the brain in quiet, miraculous ways. So, if you take one thing from this conversation, let it be this. The sharpest minds don't chase perfection. They practice presence. The 1% are not chasing youth, they are cultivating awareness. They live each day, not as a test, but as a chance to stay curious. They listen, they laugh, they keep learning, even from silence. And when you sit tonight, maybe by your window, maybe in the soft hum of evening, take a breath and remind yourself your memory is not slipping away. It's waiting for you to use it. Call it back with kindness. Feed it with life. You'll be surprised how faithfully it responds. We've learned that memory doesn't fade, it simply asks for attention. The 1% who keep their minds sharp do so through ordinary grace. They read aloud, they move their hands, they connect with others, and they fill their days with gratitude. Every conversation, every story told, every laugh shared is medicine for the mind. Forgetfulness is not failure, it's a reminder to slow down and listen. When you treat your brain with patience, it remembers how to trust you again. So tonight, whisper 3 things you're grateful for. Let your own voice be the music your mind needs. That's how memory stays alive, not through perfection, but through love. I'm Dr. Thompson. Thank you for letting me sit with you today. Until next time, stay curious, stay gentle, and never stop talking to the world, because every word you speak is a light your memory will find its way back to.